to talk about your experience living out of a van for a while and what led you to make that decision?
Yeah, so what it was is, I mean, everything kind of stems from like having a mental breakdown in like 2013. And so we'll skip all that and get to the van part and then move around. It's just, it is what it is, right? So the end result of everything was that I quit my job at Walmart. I had been there 13 and a half years, and I cashed out like my 401k. I had to split it with my ex. I cashed out, and I had vacation days that I didn't use, so they paid me for those. Like, dude, they did really good by me. And so my ex had moved, she had moved down outside of Little Rock, and so I went down to stay with her and our son, and I was like, they have an auto auction down there, so I bought this minivan, and it was a 2004 Honda Odyssey, and it had 242,000 miles on it. I paid $2,500 for it. I took it down and got the mechanics to look at it, and I mean, it didn't take much, and it was good to go. And so I started driving, and I test drove it. So like, here's the thing: it's like the mistake that I made from a van life perspective was that I never took the time to set it up with like levels and a nice bed. Like, I had a mattress in it and I had stuff, but I did not optimize my space in any way. I mean, I wasn't really in a great state of mind. I was just like reactive in doing things. But I didn't work for months, like the entire summer, and it was great. So in 2015, I quit at the end of April and like didn't go back to work. And then I didn't go to work until the end of October, and maybe it was like early November. And so it was cool. It was cool. I like got to drive, and I'd just be like going down a road, and I'd be like, yo, let me go this way. That looks cool. And I'd end up in like some national forest in Colorado, you know, and like, it was great.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Dude, like, yes, I hope that you get to enjoy that too. Like, even if you can just take 2 weeks, there's this whole like freedom of just going, I don't know where I'm going to go exactly. I'm just going to see where the road leads. Because, I mean, really, ultimately, I think that most of the time we're just post-hoc rationalizing the road being where we wanted it to go. And the truth is we just had to follow the fucker, end up somewhere. And then we're like, oh, shit, like, this is what I'm doing now. All right, this is totally what I meant to be doing, you know? So, but it's cool.
So is that something you'd wanted to do for a while, or?
We traveled a lot when I was a kid. We moved and lived a lot of different places. My dad was one of those people that was never cool with who he was. And so, like, A, he passed that down to me, and B, we moved a lot. We lived in Mexico for a few years as missionaries. And so I had dreams, like some of the medicine that they were giving me was like antipsychotics and things. It gave me really heavy dreams. And I'd have dreams of driving, and you know, I'd have dreams of going and seeing things or doing things and seeing a place. And like legit over that summer, I had probably 30 things that like reminded. I'm not saying it was foretold or anything. Our mind finds patterns, but there were a whole bunch of things that I was like that really convinced me that I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And so it worked out.
So what was it that led up to that? Because you mentioned mental breakdown.
In 2013, like at the end of 2012, I started like, I had a rough job at the time. I had always made a career a thing of like, I'm going to take on new challenges. I'm going to drive. I had moved teams a number of times. I started at Walmart right out of college. And so I was really gung-ho. And I was married, and we didn't get along very well. She had a lot of like, she's just kind of, my wife was real hard to get along with. So that... like, later therapy showed me like narcissistic abuse and things like this that I dealt with, you know, and there's a whole subplot of like males being the victims of domestic violence, which people don't really talk about, you know. And it also like there's a theory that like, I guess that it degrades your manliness, but like, dude, what am I going to do? She's fucking like 5'4" and 100 pounds. I literally can't. It would have been unmanly of me to do anything back, you know. So everything kind of crescendoed in the summer of 2013, and I had spent time in a mental institution, Springwoods Behavioral Center down in Fayetteville, and they diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder, major depressive disorder, and like all the anxiety and stuff that goes along with that. Because for a while, like even before all this, I had been having chest pains for over a year, and I got my heart looked at, and they're like, "You're fine. You probably just have anxiety." So I ended up trying to hang myself in the garage, and so I literally, I did it, and I woke up from it with a thing around my neck. I don't want to go into in case anybody hears it, there's things that I did wrong along the process, right? Mm-hmm. And it's cool. I'm fine because at least I'm alive. Yeah. But I was immediately back in the place for another week, and then I took 3 months LOA, and my relationship kept deteriorating, and I realized that my wife at the time was a big problem for me, and she didn't like it either, and so we split up, and I kept going through therapy this. So here's the thing: is I recognize a lot of people have mental illnesses, and the truth is because of having to learn about myself, I recognize that almost everybody I see has recognizable mental illnesses. Yeah. There's recognizable things, and the rebuttal, of course, and the way that I was raised is super Christian, and the rebuttal was always that oh, they're just making that stuff up. It's normal to be this way. It's not normal to be that way. The way that I was raised was not normal. My parents were not normal. I'm not normal. And a lot of my personal journey has been coming to the acceptance of who I am, because the truth is I am what I am. I went through the experiences that I went through. They shaped me. Mm-hmm. I got tired of being really the underlying subplot of everything was that I didn't like who I was ever. I never liked who I was. Whether it was because I was told that you had to basically be perfect to get into heaven, right? I don't know if you have any experience with really strict religious upbringings, but it's not good. Yeah. And it gave me a lot of trauma about myself. My dad was occasionally physically, Southern boys, you get beat. This is how it is. I don't know where you grew up at Mississippi and Texas and stuff. They just beat your ass. That's just it. Yeah. And of course, a lot of mean words and things. And so it left me where that I didn't like who I was. And a lot of that is permanent in as much as I will always have physiological responses to anxiety. I will always get an elevated heart rate. I will always feel tension in my chest. But now I know what that is, and I can mitigate it.
How do you respond to that?
Breathing exercises, and it's not even rigorous. I have a friend that's you breathe in for this many seconds and you hold it for this many, but he's a real meticulous dude. I'm a free spirit. My game is I'm just going to take deep breaths until it alleviates the chest pain, because again, it's the physical and the mental are all tied together. And so what is happening is I get uncomfortable. It makes my body tense up. It physically makes my chest tighter, which makes it harder to breathe, which then this whole feedback cycle. And so the Buddhists talk a lot about there's awareness, mindfulness. Mm-hmm. You practice mindfulness in yoga and in all these kinds of other new agey Eastern shit that integrated into our stuff, right? Cool. But all it really is paying attention to your body and being honest about what's going on with your body.
Being self-aware.
Yeah. And I would like to think that I'm a pretty self-aware dude. I definitely question just about everything that I say and do and think. I also recognize confirmation and other biases are at play. I honestly have no idea how I come across to other people. I can only judge myself based on the reflection that I get from people. Yeah. And I aim for a good reflection.
Yeah. So how do you feel about yourself now?
Well, I'll be honest. I like who I am. I have to say that. On this journey thing, dude, I went out and I went to a mountain and I was a ski bum for a couple of seasons. And in the middle, I worked at a beach hotel in Washington. So I ended up in Oregon on Mount Hood. If you ever see a picture of Portland, there's a mountain in the background. That's Mama Hood. She's beautiful, very, very nice peak. I've seen enough mountains. There's some ugly mountains out there, right? You don't think it, but there's some. So I interacted with thousands of people, and they were all mirrors to me of various factions. I interacted with women and men, and shoot, I found out women like what I look like. That's cool. I'm okay, all right, I'm handsome. I found that out at the beach hotel. That's a whole story. It's a fun story. But so I guess the moral of the story is, because I'm a very empirical dude, like I have to analyze things, and that's part of the anxiety. And I recognize that, and sometimes I catch myself on it's like, you're totally overanalyzing, dude. But there's no substitute for direct feedback. And it's not the words people say, it's the look on their face when you're talking to them. Do they even come talk to you? You know, like sometimes it is the words that they say. Like I had a number of people tell me that that I was their favorite employee or their favorite coworker or whatever. And when I left, people cried, you know, like dudes cried, like not all sobbing and stuff, but you know, like it was heartfelt shit. But basically I found out that other people liked me, so why didn't I? And not only a few other people. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to go travel, was because I had been at Walmart ever since I graduated college, and I knew a lot of people, and I know a lot of people there like me and I like them, but I needed to be like, who am I? And I had to go, like, it's so cliche, but go find myself. And I did, and I know why I'm here, and I know that, like, I know good things about myself, and I know bad things about myself too, and you know, there's a lot of, I guess, acceptance that you just got to do. Yeah. And work on things.
So what do you do to stop yourself from overanalyzing?
My entire career as a computer technologist has been about how to troubleshoot problems. And if you can objectively look at a situation versus with feelings, it's much easier. So I try to abstract myself from it. Like, you know, one of the things I learned that I do is I would get into negative thought spirals, where that it would start out like, and this was especially really bad when I was still living with my wife at the time. She'd say something, or we'd have a negative interaction, and I'd drive back to work, and the whole time I'm just like, it would basically start, you know, fairly like minor or whatever, but by the end of it, I'm just a terrible person, and it's all very quick progressive thoughts in a downward. And that's where the mindfulness came in, right? I had to learn how to stop those. So mental tools being what they are, developing the ability to stop that thought spiral meant that I was able to, once I recognize what's going on, I can like cut it off really quick. And then, but then the next thing is maybe like, why was I doing that? What's really getting at me? Like, am I bothered by something? Is there something that I'm repressing and not dealing with? Because that's a whole lot of what goes into it, right?
Yeah. So going back to when you were institutionalized, what was that day like? How did you wind up there?
So, I was in the hospital 4 times. I never went to an actual hospital. I just went straight to the mental hospital. And the first time was because I had been seeing a therapist, and I had been on antidepressants for years by then. And I went to the doctor, and my wife at the time went with me. And this is what I will say is, like, for all her faults, she kept me alive. She absolutely did. Like, I'm here today because she made sure that I got help. She couldn't do it herself, and that is what it is. So I went in for an extended weekend in like April or whatever, and that's when they diagnosed me. But I guess like none of us realized how bad it was, and then I attempted suicide on a Sunday in the afternoon. I told her about it that evening, and the next day I was in the hospital. So that was a week, and then she made sure, like, she worked with my manager and got me all LO8 at the time. And when I got out, I was in with a therapist that was really good for me, and did dialectic behavioral therapy and eye movement, which that's a whole other thing. But like, there's basically these things reprogram your mind, and when you have personality disorders, it's about the programming of how you think versus. I'm sure that I have chemical problems, no doubt. But it's not like bipolar, where that I'm legitimately having chemical issues in my head, right?
So how did you feel about being institutionalized?
Man, it is what it is, bro. Like, it hurts. People watch movies about that stuff. Like, I've told people, like, one of my buddies, Like legit started work the same day as me. Like we started work the same day. We played music together over the years and stuff. And I came through here on one of my trips. Before I settled out west, I traveled back and forth a few times, and so I was visiting with him and his wife, and I was at their wedding, and I watched her like physically recoil at the table when I was talking. And I'm like, I was only a danger to myself.
Yeah.
Whatever. Even in those moments, I've thought about it. I had fun. People liked me. And again, like, let me clarify. I don't care if people like me. I'm not in the game to be liked. What I'm really in the game for is to be loved. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I feel the only way I can do that is that I'm real. Like, that's something I had to learn about myself too, because I'd ask people like, why, what's going on here? And the biggest explanation that I got back was like, I'm real, and there's with you, what you see is what you get. And I'm going to be the same with you, and I'm going to be the same with anybody that I meet.
That's good. Have you always been like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, so this is like good and bad, right? Like I said, my upbringing was really weird, but at the same time, being able to moving every couple years meant that I had to learn how to integrate. My sister's choice was basically to just withdraw, and she just stayed by herself. But I made friends everywhere I went. And so maybe I'm more aware of it. I also recognize that a lot of the techniques are manipulative. My dad taught me how to be a pastor, and a lot of the stuff that you do as a minister is 100% manipulation.
Yeah.
Now, so where I struggle is, and two, having walked the road that I have, like, there are things that I have come across about life that I understand that normal people simply don't. And so sometimes it is perhaps helpful to manipulate other people into doing what's right for themselves.
Yeah.
But that's a whole ethical issue too.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel that I'm in the world to share, so which is why I was really happy to like come over and do this. I think that I gathered knowledge, I process it, and as I get further from it and my life continues, I have more to distill and like spread out. And so I want to write books. I want to be a public speaker. Like, I want a YouTube channel on one hand, but I'm not a maintenance guy. So honestly, I want to go on other people's YouTube channels and talk about my stuff and sell my books and things like that. Like, I've really thought about this. I mean, I was raised to be a minister, and I don't believe in Christianity anymore, but the desire to find and like share truths is still in my heart.
Well, I'll say, normally I don't put people's names on these videos, but if you want me to, I can put your name on this video.
Yeah, dude, that would be sick.
Okay. I'll do that.
I mean, I don't have like a social media presence or anything like that. That's fine.
Yeah, maybe you will someday. I don't know.
When it's time, right? So.
How do you know when it's time?
One of the beauties of that whole "let me just follow this road" mentality is you learn to trust your heart. And this, of course, this adds on to like when I was a child, I was very religious, and I believed a lot of things. And I actually like read the Bible through multiple times, and I read what Jesus said, and I read all the Old Testament stuff. And so what I extracted from that is honestly rather different than what the majority of people believe today about Christianity.
Yeah.
But there's this whole element of hearing the inside quiet voice of moving with the feeling. And also a level of the biblical word is discernment, but really what it means is wisdom about life. Like, don't just be wild and stupid because you had a feeling. Like, examine the feeling. So it's always been, I think, probably natural for me, and I see how it all connects to like the road. It's a continuous path, right? It's not like it just jumped. Like all of this stuff, all of the past adds up to what it is today and where it's headed.
Yeah.
So all I can do then is the best job I can to walk the road that's in front of me, because I didn't make it.
Yeah.
I didn't put myself on it.
Going back to your relationship, were there any red flags early on
With my
that
ex-wife?
that you maybe ignored but shouldn't have?
Oh yeah, there was a lot. So, I mean, I don't want to be disparaging, right, of the mother of my child, but there was a lot of red flags. And even early on, I recognized that it was not positive. And the truth is, too, is because of the way that I was raised, it was very much like my parents never taught me anything about dating or about how to have a relationship. And because we moved so much, I never had like an older brother type mentor to teach me. My sister didn't know any better than I did. So when you grow up in this sheltered environment, what ends up happening is you have no knowledge, no way to get your needs met, no way to like talk to somebody that you're even interested in. I didn't even know if it was okay. Like I thought it was wrong to be interested in somebody, you know? So that set me up, and interestingly enough, it set my sister up. She did the exact same thing. And my mom also, with my dad, did the exact same thing, which is to be in a position to be weak to the wrong type of person. The type of person that can push past your emotional boundaries, because really all this comes to like not just the lack of knowledge, the ignorance about relationships, but a very closed, like, holy crap, you want like in my space emotionally, and I'm not used to that.
Yeah.
So I made mistakes. I said rude things, you know. I told her that I would do half the chores when she paid half the bills, for instance, as she's sitting pregnant at the table. That was not cool. You know, there's other small things. There's other things I regret. I would say, like, if you add it up, the stuff she did was worse to me. But, like, even then, I recognize where she came from, too. I recognize her path.
Yeah.
You know? And so, yeah, there were red flags, but I didn't know any better. And the truth is like, I was 24, and I kind of made the decision. I was like, man, I've got to get moving on life. I need to start putting myself out there. And so I lowered all my boundaries. I let it happen, right? I was 100% complicit. I just didn't know where it was going to take me.
You were willing to accept anything that happened, basically.
Yeah, I was down to ride or die, you know, like whatever. But because here's the thing is, and I have found out since all of this, like, that I've learned about my own struggles with mental illness. This is actually very common with types of things like I'm talking about. I have a borderline personality disorder. She has undiagnosed narcissistic personality disorder. It's like hand in glove kind of relationship. It's just really bad. But we find each other a lot. So I needed somebody that was willing to break through my boundaries and take me on an adventure.
Yeah.
I just didn't expect it to turn so quickly. And she got pregnant right away. So, I mean, it turned really quickly. But that, again, was my lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
I could have done some things a little bit different myself, I'll say that.
Yeah, we all could.
Yeah.
Did you feel any sort of obligation to get married? Because it sounds like you felt a lot of pressure.
Yeah, we got married when she was like 7.5, 8 months pregnant. I mean, it was, I felt that I had to do it. I mean, and so what's interesting is that now I'm in a relationship with somebody who has a bunch of green flags, but because the first time, it's not that I'm judging the new one because the old one didn't work out. I want to go into this one 100% like I'm cool with where this is going, because I felt like I had to make this one work.
Yeah.
And so now I look at it and I go, I think that this is going to work, but I need to be in a place that I'm really happy to do this. I don't want to do this one out of obligation.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, I did the right thing, man. I tried to raise this kid for years. Like, he was 8 when we got divorced. That's really pretty good. I got a decade out of that. That's really good. Her previous relationships did not last anywhere near that long. But the funny thing is because I had none, like, of course mine didn't either. So,
yeah,
you know, I was probably destined to not go well.
Yeah. So, what do you think you could have done differently to avoid that situation?
So this is where you start talking about knowledge
Mm-hmm.
versus wisdom. Knowledge is how to do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, I'm talking about with what you knew.
There's no way I could have avoided it with what I knew at the time.
Okay.
And so when I was driving through the mountains, I seriously I thought about all of this stuff, and I listened to Taylor Swift 1989 for 3 months, which, judge me if you want, but she writes a great breakup album. What can I say? So, number one, I think that even if I could have done everything perfectly inside the marriage, it was still no guarantee that she would have done anything better. And so, there's that whole I can only control myself element.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is you have to look at something and say, I could only have done differently if I knew differently.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that I would have known differently was for a whole bunch of other things to be different. So you can't point in time and be like, well,
Yeah.
what would you change? Well, go back in time and tell my younger self something? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, again, the road, it's all continuous. You can't really just pick a point and expect it to be different.
Yeah.
We could also have a whole philosophical or metaphysical discussion about whether time is a construct or not,
Yeah.
So, probably not now. Need some maybe some mushrooms or something for that.
So what did you believe before when you were a Christian, as you have described?
Oh, dude, 100%. I could speak in tongues. I preached. I played music in church. I've done it all. So I was raised basically Assemblies of God, which
Okay.
is, again, tongues talking, but it all stems from a very authoritarian religious structure that was put in place to control people, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And also you find this, there's a lot of, in the South, after the Civil War, there was a lot of transgenerational family dysfunction. And that's what a lot of it was for me. Back then, because it devastated the entire South. And so people, and of course, emotionally couldn't let go. And my dad, he spanked me hard and regularly and more than he should have, but he didn't just drunkenly wail on me like happened to him and like happened to his dad and like happened to his dad, and to me, it makes perfect sense for an angry father to be super Christian, because if you actually read the Bible, which most Christians don't, you find out that God is really a super angry dude that's smiting left and right if you don't follow the very tiniest bit.
Yeah.
So,
at least in the Old Testament, anyway.
sure. Well, right. And the New Testament's cool. Jesus is super cool. And then that's a whole other thing. I think I could hang out with Jesus. You strike me as somebody that could too. My mom would not hang out with Jesus even though she goes to church every week. But then Paul can fuck off. He's an asshole. But he had to codify a religion. But how do you codify something that is such an ethereal, experience-based thing? Because Jesus' whole thing was about not really having rules, about fulfilling the rules through having the rightness of heart.
Yeah.
And that's where people make mistakes too. And so I personally strive. I want a rightness of heart. I think that there is a slim possibility that there's an afterlife. There is a slim possibility that the voice that I speak to inside is a deity, as opposed to my subconscious. Right.
So do you pray then?
Yeah.
Okay.
As part of my whole experience, I had to basically get rid of everything I couldn't prove.
Mm-hmm.
Because all of the stuff that I was taught basically didn't actually come true in life, So I had to if I couldn't prove it, and there's two things that I decided to accept. Number one is that, and I can't prove these. Number one is that there is some sort of being that communicates, some sort of being out there, and number two is that it communicates with me.
Okay.
And that I'm actually a pantheist, which means that I believe that the universe itself is God. And by God, of course, that's a whole conversation because it's a word. But in the Judeo-Christian, it means like literally a dude on the throne watching and judging and making stuff happen. I would say that my version of God is more of like an architectural kind of big giant computer and so I am a program and I need to execute to the best of my abilities. And of course, this is all because I'm a computer dude, right?
Yeah.
But I guess like you could say my desired outcome is that I do a good enough job at whatever I was supposed to do, that whatever it is out there likes me. Because if you think about it, why would a God take everybody to heaven? It's stupid. Like, I'm sorry. Like, 95% of the people don't really add value. Like, you don't go to a zoo and see cows. You go to a zoo and see like, there's an ostrich. That's pretty dope. Hey, there's a giraffe. I don't have those everywhere I drive around town. I can drive around town and see cows, So, I guess like the moral of the story there would be like, if a God were actually making a collection of beings that it would be beings that it liked, which means that you have to stand out for some reason. So my goals, and of course this all goes with the type of person that I was brought up to be, but my goals are to like be very much, I did my best to find out what was right and do it. And then it's not that I'm trying to cover my bases. Whatever made me needs to be happy with what it made. And if I make it happy, maybe it picks me to hang out. Maybe not. Maybe I just did what I felt was right and I can die knowing that.
Yeah. So how do you decide what would make that God happy?
A lot of it is feelings based. But because of the very religious environment I was brought up in, and again, to reiterate how much I personally believed it, I practiced a lot on hearing the inner voice, right? Yeah. So I don't think that someone else could easily replicate what I'm doing, which is why it's so hard to codify it. And like, that's why it won't be a religion. I'm not trying for that, So I'm aware of various biases. Of course, the strongest one is confirmation bias. And that is normally what makes prayer work. I only remember the times a prayer came true, and I don't remember the like 500 times more that they didn't come true.
Yeah.
But I have a number of like really interesting things that happened that tell me that I'm on the right path.
Okay.
And I'm very confident that what I've seen will happen. Very confident that at some point I'm going to stand up in an arena and talk to people.
Okay.
But that's because I guess you could describe it as luck. I don't know. All my life I've been lucky, like weird, random, like even in the worst of times, like luck will happen to me. So
I think that's also a matter of framing, though. Just how you look at it, because good and bad things happen to everybody. But what do you choose to focus on?
So now thank you. That helps narrow. Any effort in self-improvement, I think, is payback. If you look at examples from the Bible or holy men or whatever, like the people that we look up to, they're improving themselves. They are, in some cases, ascetics. Like there's dudes like that live on top of a pole, to demonstrate their piety. Like,
yeah.
Yo, that's cool. I lived in a van in the winter on a mountain. And it wasn't necessarily to prove my piety, but at the same time, I understand that like whole ascetic lifestyle. Very much like, I have nothing, I need nothing. This is freaking baller. I'm living it. It's great. And it strips away this like, you don't need really anything.
Yeah.
And when you have nothing and you still succeed in some fashion, you're like, yo, all right. Also, a part of my journey coming back to being a real functioning human has been learning to trust myself and my gut feeling. And what I've realized is it's heuristic learning, right? Like, I see a bunch of similar situations. I can put it together in my head. That's just how it works. It works the same and I'm working on computers. Like, I've seen basically everything happen by now. So if you can be like, oh, this is new weird system. Tell me what it's doing, and I can, figure it out. Yeah. Kind of being a jack of all trades, I guess. And rambling a lot, I guess.
It's cool. So it sounds like your time living out of a van helped you appreciate yourself more. Is that true?
Yeah. So I'll be clear too. I didn't live out of a van the entire 2 years. About half that time I had places to live. But I did spend an entire winter on the mountain in the van. And it's like, it's really enlivening. I gotta say, like, there's this whole, for one thing, I definitely had moments that I was like, yo, this is way better than living in an abusive relationship. So for that alone, It had its moments.
Well, most things are.
I mean, honestly, right. But because, of course, before you live in the van, you have to get rid of all your stuff, which means that I had no mental things holding me back physically. Like, it was literally, everything was right there. And to know that other people were like, is he gonna make it? Because the first season I had a place to live, and I'm an outgoing dude. People know me. Like, I know most everybody. Like, and so the second season, when I came back and I was living in a van, and people knew I was a Southern boy. Like, I've never lived in snow, dog. Like, this is wild. I mean, it would snow like hip deep overnight sometimes, and. Yeah. Man, it's so cool though when you have this moment of overcoming and not just one moment, but like a compilation of these moments. And what could happen to me? Like, I would definitely be sad if I lost what I have. Don't get me wrong, but I know I'd make it.
Yeah.
And it gave me a lot of strength. And I guess that's your question, is like, I gained a tremendous amount of self-respect, frankly, to be able to survive in a completely strange environment. I went from working in a cubicle in an air-conditioned office and driving 10 minutes to go home every day to driving across country and living out of a van and finding my way onto a mountain after I decided to become a ski bum. And I mean, like, I just made things happen. And I think it's Ben Franklin and I'll paraphrase the quote, but it's something to the effect of, a man has no greater fortune than to be thrown on his own skills to survive, because you find so much more depth than you ever knew that you had.
Yeah.
And I now have access to some of that.
Yeah. I know Stephen Hawking said something along the lines of, you never know how strong you are until you have no other choice.
Right? And like, I vacillate between how much empathy I have for other people. And the reason is because, like, your boy struck out and did work. Like, I recognized that my situation was, the reason, like, when I left, I knew that I was going to kill myself. Like, it was going to happen. My plan was to buy a shotgun and have it in my bed until I was comfortable enough to use it, because I'm not a gun person. But I knew that I needed something that was going to be, like, really effective. And a shotgun to the lower, like, that's 99 point something %. You're getting it, So I knew that I had no choice. And I watched other people, like, I have a buddy that went through a divorce at the same time, and his mental state was better, but like, his resolution was he slept with like 30 women. And then guess what? He's married to a woman that had 4 kids plus his. And so, like, he grumps, he's not happy. I know other dudes that did similar things, or I see so many people that remarry real quick within a year or two, and it's like, you learn nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think some people try to replace what they lost rather than learn from their experience.
And you're dead on. And, on the one hand, I'm jealous that those people didn't fall as far as I did. I felt so far I had no choice but to strike out. But on the other hand, like, aside from the pain, I'm strong, like, and I can handle business, and people don't mess with me. Like, I don't know, I think I look a little bit crazy these days, so it is what it is.
Yeah.
And my hair, I cut it, like, dude, I cut everything off, like, when we went home in March, and, but it was my hair was down in the middle of my back. And I grew it out on purpose. I wanted to see if a hobo-looking dude could work in Walmart. Like when I got hired back, my badge picture, it's pretty. I'm all handsome in it, you know, like clean cut, my hair and stuff, button-up shirt. After that, it was all, once I could get away with it, it's all t-shirts and jeans. And
Yeah.
you know, because like I'm not trying to prove. In fact, I was specifically trying not to prove things. I wanted to see, and I've had, when I left, I was a PPR 74. And when I came back, and I was a team lead, like I was running teams and meetings and, you know, all kinds of stuff. When I came back, I was in field support working overnight. I was a Tech 4, which going from pretty high up the salary chain to making hourly money, which was still better than the mountain. Don't get me wrong. But, I mean, it was also, it's not so much, maybe it was ego, but it was kind of hurtful. You know, it was painful, I'll say that, but it was really good for me because I was still rough and I needed to work some things out. And I also wanted that pain of the climb. Like, I take this back to my religious upbringing, but pain is actually purifying. Like, there's a whole thing with that, you know? So for me, and I think that has helped me in my outlook too, is it's almost Zen Buddhism, like to an extent that you just, the pain is what it is. Like, you just look past it. Mm-hmm. You're aware that it's there, but you got other stuff to do. Yeah. So for me, it proves things, right? And I also want a few haters on the way. I want people that tell me I can't do, I'll tell them like, yeah, I want to be this. And they'll be like, you can't do that. You want to know how many people I've proven wrong in the past 3 years? It's great. I mean, I'm one level below where I was. And the only reason that I'm not more is because the pandemic thing hit. But I still got a raise this year that was substantial. I got a double-digit raise because I'm a baller and my vice president and I are close. So, and here's the thing too, is everyone except for one person on this journey the second time is new. It's not like I called up, I purposely didn't call up people that I knew, you know, because I wanted to prove it. Yeah. But now I'm a baller and whatever, I can do it. Yeah. I would prefer not to. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm happy to be comfortable, and I want to keep the climb going. I don't want to do it again. Yeah. But yeah.
It sounds like you love a challenge.
Yeah, I do. So this probably goes back to being a smart person, and there's a whole thing with intelligence of having to prove it constantly, which I've learned not to do because that makes you a big jerk face, you know. But I realized early on, like, I was my own best competition. Mm-hmm. And so I guess there's not really, recognizing the challenge, like, there's not much difference in an intellectual competition with yourself. Like, how many math problems can I do in 5 minutes versus this? Mm-hmm. You know, it's all proving yourself. And how else do you gain wisdom, though? You can't just suddenly be wise either. And probably the most influential character for me out of the Old Testament was Samuel. My son's name is Samuel. My dad's name was Sammy. So there's a couple of reasons on that. But Samuel was David's son, and he was the wisest man that ever lived, theoretically, right? Mm-hmm. But he picked wisdom over riches. And because of the wisdom, he, of course, gained riches and a lot of respect and everything. And like as a 12-year-old, when we were literally in Mexico, I remember reading the scripture, and I was like, it struck a chord in me. But the question is, do I want to be wise, or was I made to want to be wise? Right? Yeah. It's fun, though.
So what happened with your son during the divorce?
That's really the hard one. They moved, of course, it took him, right? Moved down to Little Rock. And so I went from seeing him every other weekend and one day a week to seeing him every couple weeks. And I had to drive to go get him. And it basically burned up the entire Friday or Saturday and Sunday. Like, it ruined the whole experience. And I mean, I was so depressed and suicidal that's a couple months later, excuse me, is when I hit the road. And I will say that not seeing him was the hardest thing. And what's even worse is, like, they decided to move out to Washington, and I helped them move, but then I came back here. But see, her and I tried to live together. She threw me out, which she's thrown me out of every house we've ever lived in. And I'm not that hard to get along with, you know? And so that's why I lived in a van on the mountain, was because I literally had nowhere else to live. And I mean, and I had no place to get a decent job. And I had tried in this little BS town that they moved to get a job, and there was nothing there. I mean, stuff I applied to, like literally working in an O'Reilly's, like the counter at O'Reilly's, you wouldn't hear back for 6 months. It's like, and then it was just for an interview. And so I talked to him 3 times a week. We video conference sometimes. I saw him, we went camping in July. So it's kind of a mixed bag, because the boy has cried way more tears than I wanted. And frankly, so have I. There's a whole thing too with, like, you go from having a family one day to being completely 100% alone the next day. What do you do then? Like, you know, I wasn't getting my hugs when I came home, you know, like, and so, and of course, I mean, how many hugs have I missed out on? How many little moments? And my son's almost as tall as me now.
What is the dynamic like between the 3 of you now?
I mean, it's okay. It's a little weird. I think he and I have an understanding. We're cool. Like, we take adventures. I take him skiing every year. We're probably not going to go this year because of the Ronas.
Yeah.
I have worked really hard. Like, one of the things that neither of my parents, and my father passed away a few years ago. My mom's still around, but to this day, they still can't look past their mental construct of the world and actually engage with reality. And that's why, like, I'm so much about acceptance, because I saw what lacking acceptance of the world and oneself does. So we have real honest conversations, and I'm like, dude,
that's good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had to, like, my parents were married and they divorced several years after. In fact, they divorced like when my son was born, like the next year. And so my parents were together my entire upbringing. It was a very classical upbringing, right? But look at how messed up I am out of it. So I am fully aware that even if you live in the same house, that's no guarantee that you're going to have a decent relationship.
Yeah.
And because of the own conflict I have with my own parents, like, when it's my time to go, I want to say goodbye to my kid. And I want him to want to say goodbye to me. No conflict.
Yeah.
So I approached it like that. And I've been like, look, dude, you have every right to be angry with me, and I'm real sorry, and shit's wild, and that's what it is, and that's not enough, and you know, I'm not good enough. And he's the one person that can judge me. I'll say that. Like, fuck everybody else. Like, I don't owe you nothing. I made him. And I miss him. He was my buddy. Like, we'd hang out and go do stuff. And I can't even go take him to, like, get a milkshake or a burger, you know? And so, like, honestly, like, I cry about that, like, a couple times a week. And it's better because it used to be multiple times a day. And, you know, I look in and like, why did I not move back? Like, what way? And there's all kinds of dynamics there too, but... So here's a fun story about why I'm here and why I feel the way that I do about what I'm supposed to be about. He and I were camping last year out at Beaver Lake, Horseshoe Bend specifically. And there was an E. coli outbreak in the lake, and so you couldn't go swimming. And we're like literally like from here to your parking lot, like, dude, like 50 feet, like, yo, there's the water, it's 100 degrees, can we, you know, but I don't want like to crap my guts out. Like, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So I'm making dinner one evening, and we're talking. And I was like, look, man, I was having one of these conversations with him. I was like, look, dude, I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. And I can't shake that feeling. And then I was like, he's kind of like, do you know why? And I'm like, well, I think I know what I'm supposed to do, and I think this is where I need to do it. And he's like, well, what are you supposed to do? And I was like, it's going to be stupid, but I want to write books. I want to talk. I want to help people. I want to show them the path. I don't want to walk it with nobody, but I want to be like, you go that way. That's the way. And no sooner was that out of my mouth than a reporter walked up and asked if she could interview me about the lake. And like the look on his face, and so confirmation comes in weird ways. And of course, one could say that I'm just pattern finding in the void, right? I'm looking for omens. But I have a number of stories like that. So either there's a legitimate being that's talking to me, or I have learned how to be super in tune with the environment around me. And I think it's that one. Because I can justify being, like, because there's, if you think about it, to use an antiquated term, there's Indian trackers, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's people that can look at the ground and see what went through it and track the animal or the person or whatever. Like, there's people that can, like, have elevated senses, and, like, there's all kinds of biophysical explanations that don't even involve supernatural anything. And so I just feel like I'm super in tune with where, and you know what? Maybe that's how I know is there's a saying about counterfeit money, about telling real money from counterfeit money. You train a bag teller with real money and they can instantly tell if a bill is fake just by the feel of it. So if you handle, in other words, if you do something enough, you're going to recognize fake immediately. Mm-hmm. Because my whole game is trying to be balanced, I immediately know when I'm not balanced. And so I guess the question is am I actually only feeling my own balance, or am I actually feeling the environment? Is there a God that made a path, or am I just trying to walk a tightrope through nature? Either way, the action is the same.
Yeah.
I have to treat it the same. So, yeah. Thought about all of this stuff way too much, man.
I can tell.
Yeah.
So how often do you talk to your son?
Talked to him yesterday. And, so there's, like, he's 15, so of course he's gaming online with his homies all the time. Mm-hmm. And the past couple of times he and I have been on the phone. We actually chat on Discord because he's 15, right? So he'll be like, oh, my homies just came online. They're hitting me up for that voice chat. And I'll be like, dude, it's cool. You can go. He'll be like, no, let's talk for a few more minutes. So I'm doing something right.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
A lot of father-son relationships can't talk about anything but football and the weather. So,
dude, exactly. My dad never talked to me about feelings. We talked about electronics or how to work on something or how to be a preacher. Like, we talked about things.
Yeah.
Concepts, but never, yeah. And so I recognized that was the biggest thing missing from my upbringing, and that I had no coping mechanisms because I had no way to understand my own feelings. And so instead of crash course learning about it out of desperation at 35, if I can I'm just trying to give this kid a base. Mm-hmm. And I'm very clear, like, dude, I'm not saying that this is legit. It's not 100% for sure. It's how I feel. I may be wrong.
Yeah.
But it feels right. What else can we do?
I really appreciate you being open and honest and for talking to me.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I like some human interaction, and I was curious. One of the things, too, is talking things out helps us understand it better ourselves.
It does, and that's one of the reasons why I do this.
Yeah. So are you, like, getting crazy people recorded? Is, like, what's your target?
Everybody. Anybody and everybody.
If we're not guaranteed an afterlife, then the only way we live on is in the memories of the people we know, or that know us, rather. Mm-hmm. I want people to know who I am. I don't want to go through this world and be complete unknown. I don't know, a little mystery is fun. Leave them wanting more, leave them wanting more. But, yeah, like, why not? Like, what? Am I so special that I'm the only one that's ever had these feelings? Like, come on now. So, yeah.